The mansion awoke in silence, its cold and predictable routine hiding scars of distrust and loneliness. But on that Tuesday, a humble woman crossed the gate with her children and a request she could barely utter. They just need a little corner for today. As the house filled with timid laughter and curious eyes, the master secretly prepared the cruelest test he had ever devised. What he witnessed from his hiding place would challenge everything he believed in, and perhaps break a wall that had seemed unbreakable for years. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know which city you're watching from. Now let's continue. Michael Anderson woke up that Tuesday, just like every other day for the past 3 years, alone in a king-size bed that felt more like an empty territory than a place of rest. The alarm clock went off promptly at 5:45 a.m., and he silenced it with an automatic, almost robotic motion. The mansion on the Upper East Side in New York City was silent as always. A silence that wasn't peace, but absence. An absence of voices, of laughter, of life pulsing through the Italian marble hallways he was so proud of having imported directly from Carrara. He got up, put on the silk robe that cost more than many people earned in a month, and walked to the master bedroom window. From up there, on the 3rd floor of the mansion, he could see a good part of the neighborhood where addresses carried more prestige than zip codes. The Upper East Side was synonymous with success, with having made it, with winning. And Michael had won. At least that's what he told himself every morning while observing that privileged view. At 42, he was the owner of one of the largest distributors of medical equipment in the country. His company had branches in 6 states, contracts with major private hospitals, and even supplied the public system through multi-million-dollar contracts. On paper, Michael was everything a man could wish to be, but there was a price for all of this, and Michael had paid dearly. The divorce from Patricia had been a veritable judicial battlefield that lasted almost 2 years. She wanted half of everything, claiming to have given up her own career as an architect to take care of the house and support his business. Michael, for his part, was certain she had never truly loved him, that from the beginning her interest was something else. The fight started subtly, with small demands and comments about how much he worked, about how he was always absent, always prioritizing meetings and trips. Then the arguments escalated. Patricia began to question his every decision, every investment, every choice. When he discovered she was having an affair with the personal trainer at the condo's gym, Michael felt less pain from a broken heart and more anger for having been deceived for so long. The divorce proceedings revealed a side of Patricia he had never seen, or perhaps never wanted to see. She hired one of the most aggressive lawyers in New York City, a specialist in dissolving other people's assets. Each hearing was a public humiliation, each allegation an attempt to destroy the reputation Michael had spent years building. In the end, she got an apartment in Tribeca, 2 cars, and a monthly alimony that would make any ordinary worker weep with envy. But the worst part wasn't the money that left his account. The worst part was the conclusion Michael reached after it was all over. People can't be trusted. Everyone has a price. Everyone has hidden interests. And those with money must always be on alert, always suspicious, always testing the loyalty of others before it's too late. Since then, Michael had built walls around himself. Invisible walls, but as solid as the concrete walls of his mansion. His employees were hired through specialized agencies that conducted rigorous background checks. His friends, well, he didn't have friends anymore. He had partners, business contacts, acquaintances from the golf club on Sundays, but no one really got close. No one entered the forbidden zone where his real thoughts, his doubts, his frailties lived. Michael learned that trust is a luxury rich men cannot afford. As he showered in the stall that had 8 different types of jets and cost a small fortune, he thought about how predictable his life had become. Waking up early, checking emails while still in the bathroom, having breakfast alone while reading financial reports, heading to the office where he would spend the next 12 hours making the empire grow a little more. Then, returning to the empty mansion, eating something the cook left ready in the fridge, watching a documentary about business or economics and going to sleep. The next day it all repeated. Weekends were just days when he worked from home, in shorts instead of a suit. This was the life of Michael Anderson, Successful businessman, millionaire, respected, lonely. But there was one person who in a way broke the monotony of that automated existence. Joanna Fisher had been working at the mansion for almost a year and a half. She had been recommended by the same agency that provided all the maintenance and cleaning staff for Michael's properties. The agency guaranteed she had impeccable references, a clean record and exemplary punctuality. And up to that point, Joanna had never given Michael any reason to doubt these credentials. She always arrived at 7 in the morning sharp, Monday through Friday. She greeted him politely, a respectful but not intrusive good morning. She did her job with quiet efficiency, taking care of the house as if it were her own, but without ever crossing the invisible line that separated employee from employer. Michael knew little about Joanna's personal life. He knew she lived in an outer borough in East New York, Brooklyn, and that it took her almost 2 hours on public transport to get to the Upper East Side every morning. He knew she was separated or widowed. He never really asked, and she never offered details. He knew she had children, because once she asked to leave early, to pick one of them up from school due to a fever. Michael authorized it, deducted the hours from her salary as per the contract, and life went on. He wasn't cruel, just fair. He paid her salary on time, respected her labor rights, never overloaded her with absurd tasks. In return, he expected professionalism and discretion. It was a clean relationship without complications, without unnecessary emotional involvement. That morning, when he went down for breakfast, Michael found Joanna already working, cleaning the main living room. She wore the simple uniform he required, her hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her face without makeup, her expression focused on the task. He watched for a moment, hidden behind the kitchen door, just to confirm that she did everything properly when she thought she was alone. It was a habit he had developed over time, this habit of observing people when they don't know they are being watched. It's in those moments that true nature reveals itself. Michael believed this with conviction. Joanna gently wiped the bronze sculpture that had cost $80,000 at the last art auction Michael attended. She didn't know its value, probably thought it was just some decorative piece, but she treated it with care anyway. Michael noticed that. She never broke anything, never spilled cleaning products on the expensive furniture, never scratched the noble hardwood floors. Either she was very competent, or she was very afraid of being fired. Michael preferred to believe the latter. Fear was a more reliable motivator than competence. He finally entered the kitchen, pretending he had just come downstairs, and Joanna immediately appeared at the doorway. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," she said, using the formal address he never asked for, but which he insisted on maintaining. "Good morning," he replied dryly, opening the refrigerator to get the orange juice the cook always left ready in a glass pitcher. "The coffee is on the table, sir. I prepared it just how you like it." Michael nodded without looking at her and headed to the veranda table where he had breakfast every morning. Joanna went back to the living room, respecting his space. It was always like this. She knew exactly when to approach and when to stay away. She knew his routine better than any secretary at the office. This also made Michael slightly uncomfortable. He didn't like people knowing him too well. Knowledge was power, and he preferred to keep all the power on his side of the scale. While having coffee and checking emails on his tablet, Michael thought about how strange it would be if one day Joanna simply didn't show up anymore. The house would quickly fall into chaos. He depended on that routine, on that structure she helped maintain. But dependency was a word Michael hated. He didn't depend on anyone. He paid for a service, and the service was rendered. If Joanna missed a day, he would call the agency and ask for a replacement. Simple as that. Everything in Michael's life could be solved with money and well-written contracts. The day followed its normal course. Michael left for the office at 8:30 and would only return in the late afternoon. Joanna would continue to care for the mansion, as she always did, and when he arrived everything would be impeccable, silent, perfect. It was a well-choreographed dance where each knew their place and their moves. No surprises, no unforeseen events, no emotion. Exactly how Michael liked things to be. But life has a peculiar way of messing up even the most rigid routines. And on that Tuesday, without Michael knowing it yet, something was about to go completely off script. Joanna Fisher woke up that same Tuesday at 4:15 in the morning. The alarm on her old cell phone blared with a shrill noise that made her jump out of bed in a fright, as it did every day. She quickly turned it off, so as not to wake the children sleeping in the next room, separated from hers by only an improvised curtain in the small two-room apartment in East New York, Brooklyn. The rent was cheap because the building was old, because the neighborhood was far, because the walls had water damage and the elevator was always broken. But it was what she could afford with her housekeeper's salary and the small extras she managed by cleaning other houses on Saturdays. She got up in the dark, not turning on the light so as not to wake Leo and Lily, the 6-year-old, twins who were the reason for every step she took each day. In the tiny bathroom, Joanna washed her face with cold water, glanced quickly at herself in the mirror, cracked at the corner, and saw the same tired woman as always. 34 years old that looked like 45, hands chapped from so many cleaning products, deep dark circles from so many sleepless nights, hair starting to turn grey at the temples. But her eyes, they still had life. They still had hope, because they had to, for the kids. For them, Joanna could endure anything. She put on the simple clothes she wore for her commute, grabbed her bag with her uniform inside, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. She also prepared the twins' lunchboxes, as she did every night before bed, to ensure they would have something to eat at school. Bread with butter, a piece of fruit, a juice box, nothing fancy but made with love. Joanna learned early on that love is shown in the little things, in the details no one sees, but that make all the difference. At 5 o'clock, she left the apartment and walked down the 4 flights of stairs. As the elevator had been broken for weeks, on the still dark street, she walked to the bus stop where other workers were already gathering, each with their own journey of survival etched on their face. Joanna recognized those expressions. The woman who worked at the hospital, the man who was a security guard at the mall, the girl who did app-based deliveries, all waking up before the sun to cross the city and earn their daily bread. New York was like that, a city that never truly slept, where millions of people crossed paths without ever really seeing each other. The first bus was packed. Joanna managed to squeeze in and was pressed between other passengers for 40 minutes until the subway station. From there, another 20 minutes on a crowded subway. Then, another bus to finally reach the Upper East Side. When she got off at the stop near Mr. Anderson's mansion, it was 6:40. She had 20 minutes to walk the 3 blocks, change into her uniform in the service bathroom, and be ready to start work at exactly 7. Joanna had been making this journey for a year and a half. She knew every curve of the path, every tree on the sidewalk. She knew that on the 3rd block lived an elderly gentleman who always watered his plants at 7 in the morning and politely greeted anyone who passed. She knew that on the corner of the mansion there was an expensive bakery she had never entered, but whose smell of fresh bread tortured her every morning. She knew the neighborhood woke up late because rich people don't need to be in traffic at 6 in the morning. When she arrived at the mansion, she went through the back gate that Mr. Anderson left unlocked for her, followed the side path, and entered through the service entrance. In the small bathroom, she changed clothes quickly, tied up her hair, washed her hands, and checked her appearance in the mirror. She had to be presentable. She had to look professional. She couldn't show fatigue, couldn't show weakness. Mr. Anderson paid well, much better than her other cleaning jobs, and she couldn't lose this job. No way. At 7 o'clock sharp, Joanna began her tasks. First, prepare the coffee just the way he liked it, then clean the main living room. Next, the dining room, the office, the guest rooms that no one ever used. The entire routine was meticulously planned, so that by the end of the day the mansion would be impeccable. Joanna worked with dedication, not only because she needed the money, but because she took pride in what she did. Her mother always said that honest work, no matter what it is, deserves to be done with excellence, and Joanna took that to heart. Mr. Anderson wasn't a bad boss. He was distant, cold at times, but he wasn't cruel. He paid on time, never disrespected her, never asked for anything absurd. Joanna knew it could be much worse. She had worked in houses where the employers treated her as if she were invisible, where they left ridiculous tips and expected her to perform miracles. She had been harassed, had been unjustly accused of theft when a paranoid employer lost a necklace and later found it in her own purse. Compared to all that, working for Mr. Anderson was almost peaceful. But Joanna never let her guard down. She knew that rich people have their own codes, their own rules. She knew a housekeeper needed to be invisible, silent, efficient. She couldn't have personal. Problems couldn't be absent, couldn't mix her outside life with her inside work. And for a year and a half, Joanna had managed to keep everything separate. The children stayed with Mrs. Gable, the elderly neighbor who adored the kids and charged very little to look after them. The school was nearby. Mrs. Gable would pick them up and drop them off. Joanna left home at 5, returned at 7 in the evening, had dinner with the twins, helped with homework, put them to bed, and then collapsed from exhaustion shortly after. It was a hard life, but it worked, until that Tuesday. On Monday night, when Joanna got home, she found a note from Mrs. Gable under the door. The elderly woman's trembling handwriting explained that she had received an urgent call from out of state. Her younger sister was having serious health problems, and Mrs. Gable needed to travel immediately. She would be gone for an indefinite period, maybe a week, maybe more. She apologized for the inconvenience and said she would pray for Joanna to find a solution. Panic seized Joanna. Without Mrs. Gable, who would look after the twins? She had no one else in New York. Her entire family was back in Alabama, where she had left from 8 years ago, trying for a better life. She didn't have friends close enough to ask for such a huge favor. The other mothers at school barely talked to her, and those who did also worked and had their own problems. Joanna spent the night awake, crunching numbers, thinking of alternatives, trying to find a way out. Tuesday morning was worse. The school sent a message through the group text, announcing that classes were cancelled due to structural problems in the building. A serious leak in the ceiling of one of the classrooms had compromised the electrical wiring. For safety, the children had to stay home. Expected return, Thursday, maybe Friday. Joanna felt her world crumble. She had no one to leave Leo and Lily with. She had no money to pay for an emergency babysitter. She couldn't miss work, not at that time of the month when rent was due and the fridge needed to be restocked. She tried calling a few acquaintances, but no one could help. One was out of town, another was sick, a third didn't even answer the phone. There was only one terrifying option left, to bring the twins with her to Mr. Anderson's mansion. Joanna knew this was a huge risk. He could get angry, could consider it a breach of professionalism, could even fire her. But what other choice did she have? Leave 2 6-year-old children home alone? Never. Miss work and risk losing her job? Impossible. Bring them and hope that Mr. Anderson would understand. It was the only alternative. She dressed the twins in the best clothes they had, talked to them on the bus about behavior, about being quiet, about being respectful. Leo and Lily were good kids, obedient, but they were children. They had energy, curiosity, a desire to explore. Joanna repeated 1,000 times that they needed to be very quiet, that they couldn't touch anything, that this house was very expensive, and any little thing broken could cost more than she earned in months. When they arrived at the mansion, Joanna's legs were trembling. She took the twins' small hands, took a deep breath, and entered through the service entrance. She left the children in the bathroom while she looked for Mr. Anderson. She found him in the living room, reading something, on his tablet. Her heart was beating so hard it felt like it would jump out of her chest. "Mr. Anderson, I'm sorry to interrupt," she began, her voice trembling. He looked up, surprised. Joanna never interrupted him. "An emergency came up. My children's school cancelled classes because of a problem with the building, and the neighbor who looks after them had to travel urgently for a sick family member. I tried every possible alternative, but I couldn't find anyone. I brought them with me today. They'll be quiet, I promise. They won't be a bother. They won't touch anything. If you prefer, I can miss today and make it up on Saturday, or a little at a time during the week, however you think is best." Michael observed her in silence. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the embarrassment, the vulnerability. Joanna had never asked for anything, never caused any trouble. He could send her away, say this was unacceptable. But, curiously, another part of him was intrigued. He had always wondered what her children were like, if they would be as polite as their mother, if they would have the same values of respect and discretion. "All right, he said finally. They can stay, but on one condition. They cannot touch anything expensive. No artwork, no electronics, no china. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. They will behave, I guarantee it. Joanna went to get Leo and Lily, who were clinging to each other, scared. She quickly introduced them to Mr. Anderson, who just nodded his head. The children gave a shy curtsy, clutching their colourful backpacks against their chests. Michael observed the two and saw good manners, politeness, frightened but respectful eyes. Stay in the back room, Joanna told her children. Mommy is going to work, and then we'll go home together, okay? The twins nodded and followed their mother meekly. Michael returned to his tasks, but a small seed had been planted in his mind. A seed of doubt, of curiosity, of suspicion. This woman had always seemed honest, but was she really? And the children? Children from a simple family, who had probably never had access to anything luxurious. How would they react if they had the opportunity? Human nature, Michael believed, always revealed itself when no one was looking, and perhaps it was time to find out if Joanna Fisher was really as trustworthy as she appeared to be. Michael stood in the living room for a while after Joanna took the twins to the back room. He could hear her footsteps down the hall, the distant sound of the door closing, then the silence returning to the mansion. But it wasn't the same silence as always. There was something different in the air. A new presence, small lives pulsing somewhere in that giant house that normally housed only one person and his shadows. He returned to his tablet, trying to concentrate on the emails he needed to answer, but his mind wandered. He thought about how genuinely desperate Joanna had seemed when asking to bring her children. He thought about how the children had looked scared, clutching their backpacks as if they were shields against this strange and intimidating world of marble and crystal. He thought mainly about how this situation was an opportunity to test, for real, if Joanna was who she appeared to be. Over the last few years, Michael had developed a very clear philosophy of life. Everyone has a price, everyone has a breaking point. Everyone, when they think no one is watching, reveals their true nature. Patricia had seemed like a devoted wife, until the day he found out she was more devoted to the personal trainer. His former business partner had seemed like a loyal friend, until the day Michael discovered he was embezzling money from the company. His accountant had seemed honest until the day the IRS discovered hidden accounts in tax havens. Joanna seemed trustworthy, respectful, honest. But was she really? Or had she simply never had the opportunity to prove otherwise? Michael looked around the mansion, at all the expensive things he had accumulated over the years. Works of art, state-of-the-art, electronics, imported furniture. To him it was just decoration, assets, status. But to someone living on a minimum wage, who counts coins at the supermarket, who lives in a two-room apartment in the outer boroughs, all of this must have seemed like an unimaginable treasure. And the children? 6-year-old twins. Michael didn't know much about children, never wanted any, but he was sure of one thing: children have no filter. They don't have the developed self-control of an adult. If you put candy in front of a hungry child, they will take it. It's instinct, it's nature. No moral values. Can resist when the temptation is great enough and the supervision is zero. It was then that the idea began to form in Michael's head. An idea that, he knew, was ethically questionable, but that his pragmatic and suspicious mind saw as scientifically valid. A test, a private social experiment. If Joanna and her children passed, he would have confirmation that there were honest people in the world. If they didn't, well, he would have one more piece of evidence that his philosophy was right, and he could take the necessary measures. Michael stood up, grabbed his car keys, and went to the back room where Joanna had left the children. He knocked lightly on the door. Joanna opened it, still with that worried expression of someone who knows they are asking too big a favor. "Joanna, I just remembered I have an urgent meeting at the office. I'll need to be out for a couple of hours, maybe a little more. Will you be all right here with the children?" "Yes, sir, of course. You can go, no problem. I'll continue cleaning and they'll stay here quietly, drawing. I brought paper and colored pencils for them." "Great, if you need anything, my phone is on." Michael left the room and went straight to the garage. He got into his car, a black German sedan that cost more than Joanna would earn in 5 years, and left the mansion. But he didn't go to the office. He went to the most expensive supermarket in the area, the one where the shelves were organized like luxury store displays and where a simple shopping trip could cost a fortune. He entered the market with a very specific goal. He went straight to the imported sweets section, the area with Swiss, Belgian and French chocolates. He grabbed a cart and started filling it with everything he saw: boxes of liqueur-filled chocolates, milk chocolate bars with premium nuts, dark chocolate tablets with edible gold, artisanal truffles wrapped in metallic foil. Then he went to the ice cream section and got the most expensive ones: tubs of Italian gelato, artisanal ice creams from boutique brands, popsicles covered in Belgian chocolate. He moved on to the cookie aisle and filled the cart with decorative tins of Danish butter cookies, boxes of French shortbread, packages of imported filled wafers. He grabbed French jams in glass jars with elegant labels, organic honey in ceramic packaging, Greek yogurts in glass bottles, individual puddings in pots that cost the same as a full meal at a popular restaurant. Michael didn't look at prices. He took everything that looked tempting, everything that shone, everything a 6-year-old child would find irresistible. The cart got so full he had to get a second one. Other customers looked at him with curiosity, but he didn't care. The cashier didn't even blink as he scanned all the items, and the total came to over $2,000 in treats. Michael paid with his platinum card without hesitation and asked for everything to be put in thermal bags to keep the ice cream frozen. On the way back to the mansion, Michael felt a strange excitement. It was as if he were preparing a crucial scientific experiment. He even talked to himself in the car, planning every detail. The refrigerator would be organized strategically: the most colorful and eye-catching chocolates at a child's eye level, the ice creams in the freezer with the packaging facing forward, the cookies in the transparent drawers of the fridge. Everything had to be visible, accessible, as tempting as possible. When he arrived at the mansion, he parked in the garage and carried the bags in through the side entrance so as not to be seen. He entered through the kitchen, checking if Joanna was nearby. He heard the sound of the vacuum cleaner coming from the dining room. Perfect. He had time. Michael began to empty the refrigerator of everything inside. He took out the food containers the cook left, the fruits, the natural juices, the organized vegetables. He put everything in a large cooler he kept in the pantry closet. Then, with the refrigerator completely empty, he began to set the stage. First, he organized the main shelves. He placed the gold and silver boxes of chocolates right at the front, at the perfect height for a 6-year-old twin to reach. Behind them, he stacked the chocolate bars with their colorful and eye-catching wrappers. On the top shelf, he left the imported cookies in their decorative tins that looked like treasure chests. In the refrigerator door, in the compartments, he placed the Greek yogurts, the individual puddings, the jams in glass jars that reflected the internal light of the refrigerator like jewels. The freezer was even more elaborate. Michael organized the ice creams so that all the colorful packages faced forward. He stood the premium popsicles up, like little soldiers in formation, their chocolate coatings gleaming under the cold light. He scattered the frozen truffles in small glass jars that resembled lab vials full of icy treasures. When he finished, Michael stepped back and admired his work. The refrigerator looked like a television commercial, a consumer's dream, a temptation materialized in stainless steel and LED light. It was impossible to look at it and not feel the urge to grab something. If he, a wealthy adult who could buy anything he wanted, felt the slightest attraction to that scene, what would a poor child feel? Satisfied with the trap he had set, Michael moved on to the second phase of the plan. He needed to create a situation where Joanna and the children would feel completely alone, unsupervised, without fear of being caught. He needed to leave the house, or at least make them think he had left. Michael rehearsed in front of the powder room mirror. He practiced expressions of haste, of corporate concern, of an overwhelmed businessman who needs to solve something urgent. He adjusted his tie, ran. A hand through his hair, tried to look convincing. After a few minutes of amateur dramatics, he felt ready. He went to the dining room where Joanna was vacuuming with meticulous movements. She turned off the appliance as soon as she saw him. "Joanna, I have to leave now. I just got a call from the office. A serious problem came up with an important client. I'll have to go there and handle it personally. It should take a couple of hours, maybe more. Will you be all right here with the children? Yes, sir, you can go, no problem. I'll finish the cleaning and look after the kids. If you need anything, my phone is on. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Have a good meeting. Michael picked up the leather briefcase he always carried to the office, grabbed his car keys, making noise on purpose, and went to the garage. He started the engine, opened the automatic gate, drove out into the street, and closed the gate again with the remote control. Then he sat there for a few minutes, as if he were really leaving. Then he turned off the engine, got out of the car, and went back inside. The property through the back service door, the one Joanna used to enter every day. He took off his dress shoes so the leather soles wouldn't make noise and hid them behind a planter in the service area. He walked in his socks to the kitchen and quickly surveyed the layout. The pantry was the perfect spot. It was next to the kitchen, separated only by a sliding door that, when ajar, offered a complete view of the refrigerator, but kept whoever was inside hidden in the shadows. Michael entered the pantry, positioned himself behind some empty wine crates stacked in the corner, and left the door open just a few inches. From there he had a perfect view of the entire kitchen and, most importantly, the gleaming refrigerator with its tempting contents. He checked his watch, 10:20 in the morning. He calculated he would stay there until a little after noon, maybe 1 in the afternoon, 2.5 hours, 3 hours of vigil at most. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it would be revealing. Michael settled in as best he could among the boxes and crates, found a position that didn't hurt his back too much, and began his wait. The first 15 minutes were easy. Michael was alert, focused with the adrenaline of expectation coursing through his veins. He could hear the distant sound of the vacuum cleaner, Joanna's footsteps through the hallways, the general silence of the house only slightly disturbed by the cleaning routine. He began to imagine what the scene would be like when they entered the kitchen. He imagined the children's reaction, that moment of wonder, their little hands inevitably reaching out to grab something. After half an hour, the discomfort began to set in. His back complained about the strange position. His legs started to tingle. The heat of the pantry without proper ventilation made Michael sweat. He loosened his tie, undid the top buttons of his expensive dress shirt. He thought about giving up for a moment, but his stubbornness won. He had to see. He needed to know. Almost an hour passed before he finally heard voices approaching the kitchen. Michael's heart sped up. He hunched down even further behind the boxes, held his breath, became completely still. Through the crack in the door, he saw Joanna enter first, followed by the 2 twins holding hands. The mother went straight to the refrigerator just to get water, but the moment she opened the door, all 3 of them froze. Michael watched their expressions change from neutral to completely stunned. Joanna's eyes widened, her mouth fell slightly open in genuine surprise. Leo and Lily let go of each other's hands and moved closer, mesmerized. "Mom, look!" exclaimed Leo, his voice full of wonder. "It's a fairy tale fridge." "There's chocolate," said Lily, pointing. "Real chocolate, the kind from the commercials." "And ice cream, Mum, so much ice cream," added Leo. Joanna remained standing there, holding the refrigerator door open, staring at the impossible scene. Michael saw the confusion on her face. In the morning when she arrived, the refrigerator had been normal. How had it become this? Why had it become this? But she had no time to process the questions because the twins were already in a trance. Hidden in the pantry, Michael felt his heart pounding so hard he was afraid they would hear it. This was the moment. Leo's little hand stretched out slowly towards a golden box of chocolates that was exactly at his height. His little fingers approached the shiny packaging. Michael leaned forward, almost leaving his hiding spot. He was about to witness the confirmation of everything he had always believed, but then Joanna reacted. "No," she said, but not with anger. Calmly. She gently held Leo's arm before he could touch the chocolate. She knelt down to be at eye level with the twins. Michael could almost feel the children's held breath. He closed his eyes for a moment, waiting for some lame excuse, some deceitful justification, some veiled permission. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Joanna looking at her children with a quiet seriousness. "My loves, you know that none of this is ours, right?" "But, Mum, there's so much," replied Lily. "The owner of the house won't even notice if we just take a little bit." Michael felt a strange pang in his chest hearing that. It was innocence mixed with childish logic. To the little girl, really, with so much chocolate, what would one less be? "Lily, Leo, look at me." Joanna spoke with that voice mothers use when they need to teach something important. "It doesn't matter if there's a lot or a little. It doesn't matter if the owner will notice or not. What matters is that it's not ours. Do you understand?" "But, Mom, it's just one chocolate," insisted Leo. "Taking what isn't ours has a name, my children. And do you know what that name is?" The twins lowered their heads. "Stealing," they answered in unison, ashamed. "That's right. And I didn't raise you to be known by that name. I raised you to be known as honest, hard-working people of character, as people who respect what belongs to others, even when no one is looking." In the pantry, Michael felt something strange happening inside him. It was as if a sharp pain shot through his chest. Joanna's words echoed, "Even when no one is looking." But he was looking. He was there, hidden like a coward, spying on a moral lesson he himself had forgotten long ago. "But, Mom, we could brush our teeth after," promised Leo, trying to negotiate. "And we could only eat it on Friday when we get good grades," added Lily. Joanna smiled tenderly but shook her head. "It's not about brushing your teeth or getting good grades, my loves. It's about doing the right thing always, even when it's hard, even when you really want to. Do you think I've never wanted to take something from the houses where I work? There are so many beautiful things, so many expensive things, but I don't. Do you know why?" "Why, Mom?" they both asked. "Because I need to be able to look at you both every day and know that I'm being the right example. I need to be able to sleep at night, knowing I earned every penny honestly. And I need you to grow up knowing that no matter how hard life is, there is always, always the choice to do the right thing." Michael closed his eyes. Joanna's voice was soft but firm, full of conviction. It wasn't a lecture, it was a lesson. It wasn't punishment. It was love. He felt a shame so profound that he almost came out of there, almost revealed the whole charade right then. But he remained paralyzed, unable to move. The twins were quiet for a moment, processing. Then Lily asked, "But are we never going to try it?" "One day, you'll have your own money, and you'll be able to buy all the chocolates you want. And it will taste so much better because you'll know you deserved it, that you worked for it, understand?" "Yes, Mom," they replied, still with a hint of sadness. "Now let's do this. I'm going to get water for the three of us, and we'll go back to the room. After lunch, if you behave well, we'll eat those caramel candies we bought at the market on Sunday, okay?" "Okay," the twins agreed. Joanna took only the pitcher of filtered water that was inside the refrigerator, poured 3 glasses, and closed the door. The three of them left the kitchen, holding hands. Michael remained hidden, sweating, his heart racing, and a whirlwind of emotions he couldn't name. He had just witnessed something his cynical worldview said was impossible. A poor woman, with children hungry for experiences she could never provide, having the perfect opportunity to take something without being discovered and choosing not to. More than that, teaching her children not to take it either. Teaching values, integrity, character. Michael stayed there in the pantry for a few more minutes, trying to compose himself. His legs were numb, his back ached, but none of that mattered in the face of the emotional turmoil that was overwhelming him. He had set a cruel trap, hoping to confirm his negative view of humanity. And instead, he had just witnessed one of the purest displays of character he had ever seen in his life. But the test wasn't over yet. Maybe that was just luck, just a fleeting moment of lucidity. Children are unpredictable. If one of them came back alone without the mother around, would they resist again? Michael decided to continue his vigil. He needed to be absolutely sure. Michael remained hidden in the pantry as the minutes dragged on like hours. Sweat dripped down his forehead, staining the Italian dress shirt that had cost a small fortune. His legs had lost all feeling, numb from the uncomfortable position. He tried to shift slightly to relieve the pressure, but every movement made the empty wine crates creak threateningly. He stayed still again, breathing slowly, trying to control the physical discomfort that was nothing compared to the emotional discomfort taking over him. From the distant living room, soft sounds of conversation reached him. Michael strained his ears, trying to catch the words. It was Joanna and the twins, their voices blending in a familiar melody of affection. He heard childish laughter, the mother's voice, responding with patience, more laughter. These were sounds this mansion had never heard before. Michael and Patricia had never laughed together like that. In fact, Michael couldn't remember the last time he had truly laughed, not out of politeness or social convenience. The clock read 11:40 when something finally happened. Michael heard light footsteps approaching the kitchen. Just one pair of footsteps, not three. His entire body tensed. He leaned forward, ignoring the pain in his back, focusing all his attention on the crack in the door. A small figure appeared. It was Leo, one of the twins, alone. The boy entered the kitchen with a small plastic cup in his hand, one of those colorful children's cups with cartoon characters on it. He went to the sink, climbed onto the small stool Joanna had likely placed there earlier, and filled the cup with water from the tap. He drank it in quick gulps, as children do when they are really thirsty. Then he got off the stool and stood there in the middle of the kitchen. Michael held his breath. The boy was staring intently at the refrigerator. His dark little eyes shone with that mix of desire and curiosity that only children have. Leo took a step toward the refrigerator, then another, then one more. He was less than a yard from the gleaming door. Michael's heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The child was alone, without his mother's supervision, without witnesses, or so he thought. Leo reached out his small hand and touched the refrigerator handle. Michael almost leaped from his hiding place, already mentally preparing what he would say when he caught the child with his hand in the cookie jar. But then something extraordinary happened. The boy stopped. He simply stopped. With his hand still on the handle, he stood there motionless, as if fighting an internal battle. Michael saw his little face scrunch up in an expression of intense concentration. And then Leo began to talk to himself, in a whisper that could barely be heard. "I promised, Mom. A pinky promise, and you can't break a pinky promise. Grandma always said that people who break promises get a small, sad heart. I don't want a small heart. I want to grow up and buy chocolate for Mom, so she doesn't have to work so hard." The boy rested, his forehead against the cold door of the refrigerator, as if saying goodbye to a dream. He stayed like that for a few seconds. Then, with a sigh far too deep for such a small child, he pulled away. He turned his back on the refrigerator and ran back to the living room, making a small sound of victory on his way, as if celebrating a personal achievement. Michael was frozen in his hiding spot. Something inside him was breaking, shattering into 1,000 sharp pieces. He had just seen a 6-year-old child, who had probably never tasted imported chocolate, in his life resist temptation because of a promise, because of values someone had taught with such care that they had become stronger than any material desire. When was the last time Michael had kept a difficult promise? When was the last time he had chosen to do the right thing even when no one was looking? He couldn't remember. In fact, his entire life was built on the premise that everyone cheated when they had the chance. He cheated in business, found loopholes in contracts, made deals in legal gray areas. He always justified it by saying that's how the world worked, that those who didn't protect themselves ended up getting hurt. But here was a 6-year-old child from a poor family teaching him, a wealthy businessman, a lesson about character that he had forgotten or perhaps never properly learned. The shame Michael felt in that moment was so intense that he wanted to run out of there, throw himself into a cold shower, try to wash away the invisible filth that seemed to cover him completely. But he didn't move. He stayed there, sweating, aching, emotionally shattered, because a masochistic part of him felt he deserved this suffering. He deserved to feel every second of this torture he had created for himself. Time continued to pass. Michael no longer knew how long he had been there. It felt like an eternity. His throat was dry, his mouth tasted like metal, his legs were 2 lifeless logs. He thought of all the traps he had set throughout his life. Traps in contracts, in negotiations, in relationships, always testing, always suspecting, always hoping to confirm the worst in people. And how many times Had he really given people a chance to show their best? From the living room, other sounds began to emerge. More animated, childish voices discussing something. Michael managed to catch fragments. The twins were drawing. Lily wanted to use the blue pencil. Leo insisted that red looked better. Joanna mediated with patience, suggesting they each do it their own way. More laughter. The sound of paper being accidentally torn, followed by a collective "oh no," and then a creative solution involving tape. These were the sounds of a family. A simple family without money, without luxury, without any of the things Michael had always thought were essential for happiness. But they were happy. Michael could hear it, in the quality of their laughter, in the tone of their voices, in the way they communicated. There was affection there. There was a bond. There was something that no amount of money could buy, and that he had lost somewhere along the way. He thought of Patricia again. Had the marriage failed because she was a gold digger, or because he had never truly allowed her into his life? Had she sought out the personal trainer because she wanted luxury, or because she wanted attention, affection, presence? Michael had always worked 12, 14, 16 hours a day. He had always prioritized business above all else. He had always thought that providing financially was enough, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it never had been. A child's voice, louder than the others, pulled him from his reflections. It was Lily. "Done. Let's give it to him when he gets back." Give him what? Michael thought. He strained his ears, trying to understand. "Are you sure he'll like it?" asked Leo, with a hint of insecurity in his voice. "Yes, he will." "We drew it with our hearts," replied Joanna. "And when we do things with our hearts, people can feel it." Michael felt an enormous curiosity. What had they done? He wanted to run out of his hiding place just to see, but he controlled himself. He had come this far, had subjected himself to this ridiculous situation, had opened this wound in his own conscience. He could endure a little longer. He had to see the end of what he himself had started. A few more minutes passed. Michael checked his watch. 12:20. He had been there for over 2 hours. His legs were completely numb. He would have trouble walking when he finally got out. His back throbbed with pain. His clothes were soaked with sweat. But none of that mattered anymore. All the physical pain was insignificant compared to the emotional pain he was feeling. Then, finally, he heard Joanna say, "All right, my loves. Let's tape the drawing to the fridge. That way he'll see it when he gets back." Footsteps approached the kitchen. Michael shrank even further into his hiding place, making himself as small as possible. The three of them entered. Joanna in front, holding something colorful, the twins behind her, excited. "Here," decided Joanna, pointing to a spot on the refrigerator door. "This way it's right, in view." She took a piece of tape she had brought from the back room and taped what looked like a sheet of paper to the refrigerator. The twins watched anxiously. "Will he like it, Mum?" asked Leo. "Yes, my son, he will." It was a very beautiful gesture from you both. Michael couldn't see exactly what it was, only that it was colorful. His desire to run out and look was almost unbearable, but he controlled himself. He waited until the three of them had left the kitchen again. He waited another 5 minutes just to be sure. Then, finally, with great care, he began to move. Getting up was torture. His legs didn't respond properly, tingling intensely, as if thousands of needles were being stuck into them. He had to lean on the boxes, take a deep breath, wait for the blood to start circulating again. When he finally managed to stand, he staggered, almost fell. He held onto the pantry shelf, waited for the dizziness to pass. Then, with trembling steps, he emerged from his hiding place. The first thing he did was go to the refrigerator, and there was the drawing. Michael stood there looking at that piece of children's art and felt his eyes well up for the first time in years. It was a simple drawing made with colored pencils, but it conveyed so much affection it was almost palpable. The refrigerator had been drawn with legs and arms, as if it were a person. Around it, colorful little hearts floated, a pink one, a blue one, a yellow one, a green one. And below, in crooked, uneven letters, typical of someone just learning to write, was a message that pierced Michael's heart like a spear. "Thank you for letting us stay at your house. Mum said we can't take anything that's not ours. We promise we won't. We respect your things. When we grow up, we will work hard, and buy chocolate for our mum. Thank you for everything. Leo and Lily. Michael read and reread that message. Every word was an accusation, not against the children but against himself. They had just shown gratitude for something he had done with cruel intentions. They were thanking him for being tested, for being put in a trap, for being treated with suspicion. And in return they offered respect, promises, future dreams of working to give their mother a better life. He opened the refrigerator, more out of reflex than for any other reason. Everything was exactly where he had put it. Every box of chocolates, every chocolate bar, every tub of ice cream, every imported cookie. Not a single wrapper had been touched, not one had been moved. All intact, all perfect, all there, silently mocking his suspicion. Michael closed the refrigerator and rested his forehead against the cold door, just as Leo had done earlier. And finally, after 3 years of self-imposed coldness, after building emotional walls that seemed impenetrable, after convincing himself that he didn't need anyone and that no one deserved his trust, Michael wept. He cried for the cruelty of his test. He cried for the innocence he had tried to corrupt. He cried for the lessons a poor family had just taught him. He cried for the person he had become, this cynical, lonely businessman who saw the world as a battlefield where everyone was an enemy until proven otherwise. He cried for all the years he had wasted, not allowing anyone to get truly close. He cried for the empty life he had built inside that mansion full of expensive things but completely devoid of love. And there, standing in the kitchen, his shirt stuck to his body with sweat, his legs still numb, his heart in pieces, Michael Anderson had an epiphany. The test was never about Joanna or the twins. The test was always about him, about whether he still had the capacity to recognize goodness when he saw it, about whether he still had the humility to learn from people he had always considered his social inferiors, about whether there was still any chance of redemption for someone who had become so completely lost along the way. He took a deep breath, wiped his face with his hands, tried to compose himself. He needed to end this charade. He needed to go out, take a drive, come back for real, and face the consequences of what he had done. But most of all, he needed to apologize. He needed to get on his knees before that family and beg for forgiveness for having doubted them, for having tested them, for having been so small in his financial greatness. Michael went out through the service door, picked up the shoes he had left hidden and put them on with difficulty as his feet were swollen. He walked to the car in the garage, started the engine for real this time, and drove out into the street. He drove around the block, then again, trying to buy time to organize his thoughts, to find the right words, to gather his courage. As he drove aimlessly through the streets of the Upper East Side, he thought about everything he had witnessed. Joanna's conversation with her children the first time they opened the refrigerator, the way she explained respect and honesty, not with threats or punishment, but with love and patience. The scene of Leo alone in the kitchen, fighting temptation and winning because of a pinky promise. The drawing they made, full of gratitude and purity. Each image was a stone thrown at the glass house of his arrogance. Every sound he had heard hidden in that pantry was a punch to the gut of his certainty that the world was a bad place full of even worse people. Joanna and the twins didn't know they were being tested, but they had passed with flying colors an exam that the examiner himself had miserably failed. If you were in Michael's shoes, would you have had the courage to set up such a cruel test, or would you have given these people the chance to show who they really are from the beginning? Let us know in the comments. Michael finally parked his car in front of a small park in the neighborhood. He sat there watching children play, nannies chatting on benches, dogs chasing balls. Normal, simple life happening around him, while inside him an emotional earthquake was destroying the foundations of everything he believed. He thought about his company, about all the employees he'd had over the years. How many were honest like Joanna, but he had never given them credit? How many were dedicated, but he had always viewed with suspicion? How many opportunities for real human connection had he missed because he was too busy setting up tests, creating traps, confirming his worst suspicions? He thought of Patricia again. Would it have been different if he had given her the benefit of the doubt? Had she sought affection elsewhere because he had never truly offered it? Of course, she had been wrong, the affair was indefensible, But what if he had been a present, trusting, open husband? Would the outcome have been the same? Michael had no answers. He only had the certainty that something inside him had changed that morning, seeing those children resist temptation because of values taught by their mother. Seeing Joanna choose to educate rather than enable, choosing the difficult path over the convenient one. Seeing that family isn't about money, but about connection, about presence, about love shown in the small things. He checked his watch. 1:15 in the afternoon. He had to go back. He couldn't delay any longer. He had to face what he had done, take responsibility, ask for forgiveness. Starting the car and returning to the mansion was one of the hardest things Michael had ever done in his life. Every yard he drove toward that house was a yard toward his own exposed shame. When he entered through the front door, making noise to announce his arrival, he was immediately greeted by the twins. They ran up to him with an excitement Michael hadn't expected. Leo and Lily each took one of his hands, pulling him toward the kitchen. Mr. Anderson, we have a surprise for you." Joanna appeared at the living room doorway, wiping her hands on a cloth. She seemed slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir, the children made a drawing and put it on the fridge. If you'd like, I can take it down." "No, leave it," Michael replied, his voice coming out hoarser than he expected. "I want to see it." The twins dragged him to the kitchen, proudly pointing to the work of art taped to the refrigerator door. Michael feigned surprise, pretended he was seeing it for the first time, pretended those childish words hadn't just reopened the wound in his chest. "How beautiful," he said, crouching down, to be at the children's level. "Did you make this for me?" "Yes. To thank you for letting us stay here," explained Lily. "And so you'd know we didn't touch anything," added Leo with seriousness. Michael looked at the refrigerator, then at the twins, then at Joanna, who was standing at the kitchen door watching the scene. And then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He opened the refrigerator door. Everything was intact, exactly as he had left it. Every chocolate, every ice cream, every cookie. Joanna was confused, looking at the impossible abundance that hadn't been there that morning. The twins were once again mesmerized by the sight. Michael closed the refrigerator and turned to Joanna. It was time to confess. It was time to open that wound and let all the pus of shame drain out. It was time to be honest for the first time in a long time. It was time to find out if there was still enough humanity left inside him to admit he was wrong, completely wrong, about everything. "Joanna, I need to talk to you. Now. It's important." Michael's voice came out more shaky than he intended. Joanna noticed the seriousness and became visibly worried. She immediately thought she had done something wrong, that bringing the children had been an irreparable mistake, that she was about to be fired. Fear filled her face. "Yes, sir. What is it? Did I do something wrong?" The twins, sensing the tension in the air, fell silent. Leo held Lily's hand, and they both watched the adults with the intuition children have for important moments. "It's not you who did something wrong. It was me." Michael took a deep breath. He had never been good with words in emotional moments. He was always better, with numbers, contracts, negotiations, but there was no escape here. "Sit down, please, and the children too. You need to hear this." Joanna obeyed, confused, sitting in one of the kitchen chairs. The twins climbed into other chairs, still holding hands, their wide eyes fixed on Michael. He remained standing, unable to sit, pacing back and forth like an accused man before a jury, and that's exactly what he was, an accused man who needed to confess his crime. "I didn't have a meeting today. I didn't leave. I did leave, but I didn't go to the office. I went to the supermarket. I bought all of this." Michael pointed to the refrigerator. "I spent over $2,000 on candy, chocolates, ice cream, all on purpose, all planned." Joanna frowned, not understanding where he was going with this. "Planned for what, sir?" "To test you." Michael stopped pacing and faced Joanna directly. "To test you and your children, to see if you were really honest or if it was just for show." The silence that followed was deafening. Joanna turned pale. Her eyes widened in shock and slowly, The understanding of the situation formed on her face. The twins didn't fully understand, but they sensed that something very serious was happening. "You tested me." Joanna's voice was low, almost a whisper. "You tested my children." Worse than that. Michael felt the tears returning, but this time he didn't try to hold them back. "I hid in the pantry. I was in there for over 2 hours, hiding, sweating, waiting to catch you taking something. I wanted to confirm that no one can resist when they think they're alone. I wanted to prove that everyone has a price." Joanna stood up from the chair slowly, as if in a trance. Her expression was a mixture of pain, anger, disappointment, and something Michael couldn't quite decipher. "You used us. You used my children. You set a trap to prove that we are... what? Thieves? Is that it?" "No. I mean, yes, I did that. But not because I thought you were thieves. I thought everyone is. That everyone steals when they have the chance. That no one is truly honest when they're alone." "And what did you find out?" Joanna's voice now had a hardness Michael had never heard before. "Did you get the confirmation you wanted?" "No, I got the opposite." Michael knelt right there on the cold kitchen floor before Joanna and the children. "I saw you resist. I heard you teaching your children about respect, about character, about honesty. I saw Leo here alone, his hand on the fridge, making a promise to himself not to take anything. I saw you make this beautiful drawing, thanking me for something I did with the worst intentions, and I realized the test was never about you. It was about me. And I failed. I failed miserably." Tears now streamed freely down Michael's face. The twins had never seen an adult cry like that, let alone a rich and powerful adult like Mr. Anderson. Leo started crying too, not really understanding why, just because the emotion in the air was too intense to ignore. Lily held her brother's hand tighter, her own eyes welling up. Joanna stood there looking at this man kneeling in her kitchen, on the floor she herself had scrubbed earlier. She had every right to be furious, every right to take her children and leave, never to return, to sue him for humiliation. But as she looked at Michael, she saw something she recognized because she had felt it herself. The pain of someone carrying old wounds, the loneliness of someone who built walls instead of bridges, the desperation of someone who finally realizes they've lost their way. She took several deep breaths, trying to control her own emotions. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer but still heavy with pain. "You're not the first person to distrust me, Mr. Anderson. I've been accused of theft. I've been searched. I've been humiliated. For being poor, for working in rich people's houses, for existing in a space that some people think isn't mine. But you are the first one who has the courage to admit it, to kneel, to cry. And that counts. That makes a difference." Michael looked up, incredulous at the possibility of forgiveness. "I don't deserve your understanding, not after what I did. No one deserves forgiveness. We earn it when we ask from the heart." Joanna sat down again, calmer now. "My mother always said, everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone has the courage to admit it and change. You made a big mistake. You humiliated us without us even knowing. But you're here on your knees owning it. That's a start." The twins, not fully grasping the gravity of the situation, but understanding that the test was a bad thing, had a reaction that surprised both adults. Lily got down from her chair and went to Michael, still kneeling. She touched his shoulder with her small hand. "You're just like Darth Vader," she said with the seriousness of someone who has made an important discovery. Michael looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "In the movie. He was bad, but in the end he remembers who he really is and becomes good. Mom says everyone can change if they really want to." Leo, encouraged by his sister, also got down from his chair. "It's like in the cartoons. The bad guy always makes plans, but in the end, he learns and becomes friends with everyone." Michael didn't know whether to laugh or cry at these childish comparisons, but there was a simple wisdom in those words, an innocence that saw the possibility of redemption where cynical adults would only see hypocrisy and manipulation. "You two are incredible," he said, looking at the twins. "Your mother has taught you things that took me 42 years to learn, or rather, to unlearn and learn again." Joanna stood up and extended her hand to Michael, helping him rise from the floor. It was a symbolic gesture, a hand extended to someone who had fallen, literally and metaphorically. "You're going to hurt yourself kneeling on this floor," she said with a small smile that wasn't quite total forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Michael stood up, holding her hand, feeling a strength in that grip that went far beyond the physical. It was the strength of someone who survives each day with dignity despite all difficulties. It was the strength of someone who chooses to teach their children values even when the world seems to reward the opposite. It was the strength of someone who forgives even when the wound is still fresh. "I want to do 3 things," Michael said, still holding Joanna's hand. "First, I'm going to increase your salary, double it, and it's not out of pity or guilt, it's because you're worth it and always have been. Second, I'm going to create an education fund for Leo and Lily. They will go to the best schools, have the best opportunities. They'll be able to choose whatever future they want." Joanna opened her mouth to protest, to say she didn't want charity, but Michael raised his hand. "It's not charity. It's an investment in the right people, with the right values. And third, I want to ask something of you and the children, something much more important than money." "What?" asked Joanna cautiously. "I want you to teach me how to trust again, to see goodness without looking for ulterior motives, to build bridges instead of walls, to be a real human being." The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was contemplative. Joanna looked at her children, who nodded their heads excitedly as if approving a major deal. She looked back at Michael and saw, for the first time, not the rich, distant boss, but a broken man trying to fix himself. "All right," she said finally, "we'll teach you, but you have to be willing to really learn. It's not just talking, it's doing, every day, even when it's hard." "I promise." "A pinky promise," Michael said, extending his little finger to the twins, who laughed at the reference to their own promise. They intertwined their little fingers with his, sealing a pact that was much more than a childish gesture. It was a commitment to genuine transformation. "Now," said Michael, turning back to the refrigerator, "we have $2,000 worth of treats here that need to be consumed. And I've just realized something. Chocolate that's just stored away is useless. Chocolate is meant to be shared." He opened the refrigerator and began to take everything out. He placed all those boxes of chocolates, chocolate bars, tubs of ice cream, and imported cookies on the kitchen table. The table was full, overflowing with sweets. Leo and Lily looked on with that sparkle in their eyes that children have when the impossible becomes real. "Can we?" asked Leo, still hesitant. "You can." Michael smiled, a genuine smile that hadn't visited his face in years. "In fact, you more than can, you must. But let's eat together, because I discovered today that the best things in life are no fun when you're alone." They sat down at the table, the 4 of them. Joanna got plates from the kitchen and began to serve. The twins chose their first delicacies with an almost religious reverence, as if they were touching sacred relics. Michael watched every movement, every expression of wonder, every careful bite followed by exclamations of pleasure. When Leo tasted the first chocolate with hazelnut filling, his eyes closed in pure ecstasy. "Mom, it's like my tongue is in heaven." Lily tried a butter cookie and declared, "This is magic, real magic." Joanna ate slowly, savoring not just the sweets, but the moment. It was the first time in 8 years she had sat at a table like this, with no rush to leave, no worry about the next job. Without the constant weight of survival on her shoulders, she looked at Michael and saw tears streaming down his face again, but this time they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of something he hadn't felt in a very long time: gratitude. Michael took a milk chocolate bar, broke it into pieces, and distributed it to everyone. When he bit into his piece, he realized he couldn't even remember the last time he had eaten real chocolate, with attention, savoring it. He always ate distractedly, reading emails in meetings, rushing between appointments. But there, at that impromptu table of sweets with a family he had tried to unmask, just hours before, the chocolate tasted like a new beginning. The twins stayed at the mansion until the late afternoon. Michael cancelled all his appointments for the day, something he had never done before. After the feast of sweets, he sat on the living room floor with Leo and Lily, and for the first time in decades he drew. They were terrible drawings, he admitted. His dinosaurs looked like deformed chickens. His houses looked like stacked boxes. The twins laughed without malice, offering tips, showing him better ways to hold the colored pencil. Joanna, who had returned to her cleaning tasks, because she didn't know how to handle the surreal situation, stopped and watched the scene. She saw a millionaire businessman sitting on the imported marble floor, his tie loosened, the knees of his expensive suit pants creased, focused on coloring a sun the children had drawn. She saw her children patiently teaching, praising every attempt no matter how disastrous, and she saw, for the first time since she started working there, that giant mansion looking like a real home. When it was time for them to leave, Michael insisted on paying for a car service to take them to East New York. Joanna tried to refuse, saying they were used to the bus, but he was firm. "You've given me so much today, at least let me do this, please." On the way to the door, Leo tugged on the sleeve of Michael's jacket. "Mr. Anderson, are we coming back tomorrow?" "Your mom is. You'll come back when school is cancelled again or when Mrs. Gable can't look after you, but—" Michael knelt down to be at the boy's level. "If you want, sometimes you can come just to visit, to draw, to eat chocolate. What do you think?" The twins looked at each other, and then at their mother, silently asking for permission. Joanna nodded, still processing everything that had happened on that impossible day. "We want to," they said in unison. When the car finally arrived and they left, Michael stood at the mansion door waving until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. Then he went inside and looked around. The house was the same, with the same expensive furniture, the same works of art, the same impeccable marble, but it felt completely different, as if it had finally been truly inhabited, even if only for a few hours. He went back to the kitchen and looked at the drawings still taped to the refrigerator with legs and arms, the colorful hearts floating around it, the childish message of gratitude and respect. Michael took that sheet of paper carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. He took it to his office and looked for a suitable frame. He found an expensive golden one he had bought for some business award certificate. He took out the certificate and put the drawing in its place. He hung the frame on the main wall of his office, right behind his desk, where he would see it every day. That drawing would be his new certificate, his new achievement, his new award. It would be a permanent reminder that he could not go back to being who he was before, that he had made a promise, and promises, especially pinky promises, were sacred. That night Michael had dinner alone, as he always did, but the silence of the mansion was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibilities, of hope, of a second chance he didn't think he deserved but had received anyway. Before going to sleep, he did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He prayed. Not a request, but a thank you. He gave thanks for being surprised, for being humbled in the right way, for finding people who taught him more in one day than he had learned in decades of business success. In the days that followed, real changes began to happen. Michael did double Joanna's salary and created an education fund for the twins in his own name. But beyond that, he began to change how he treated everyone around him. At the office, he started greeting the cleaning staff by name, asking how they were and actually listening to the answers. He stopped setting tests and traps for people and started giving them the benefit of the doubt. It wasn't an instant, magical transformation. There were relapses, moments when the old suspicion returned, situations where his instinct was to raise the walls again. But every time that happened, Michael would look at the framed drawing in his office. He would see that refrigerator with legs and arms, see the colorful hearts, see the promise of children who chose the right thing even when it was difficult, and he would compose himself. Leo and Lily returned to the mansion a few times, not many because Joanna didn't want to take advantage, but enough for that house to start accumulating memories of childish laughter, of drawings scattered around the living room, of afternoons when Michael would drop everything to sit on the floor and play. He was terrible at children's games, he admitted, but the twins had infinite patience, and slowly, he learned. The refrigerator never went back to having that television commercial decor. Michael kept normal things in it, but he always had some special. Chocolate stored in a box, not to test anyone, to share when the right people visited. The relationship between Michael and Joanna changed too. It was no longer just employer and employee. It was something more complex, more human. They talked about life, about the challenges of raising children, about dreams and fears. Michael found out that Joanna wanted to take a technical course in nursing, and he offered to pay for it. She accepted after much hesitation and began night classes. The months passed, and that Tuesday of cruel testing and profound revelations became a story they sometimes recalled, with less pain each time. It became almost a personal legend, the day everything changed, the day a rich man discovered he was poor in what truly mattered, and a simple family showed they possessed treasures no money could buy. Michael never went back to being the cold, calculating businessman he once was. His business decisions remained smart, but they gained a human component that hadn't existed before. He started investing in social programs, giving opportunities to people from disadvantaged communities, using his wealth not just to accumulate more, but to make a real difference in the lives of others. And every time he was about to make an important decision, whether in business or his personal life, he found himself thinking, what would Leo and Lily do? What would Joanna say? How can I do this in a way that respects the people involved? It was a new filter, different from the cynical filter of before, and it worked better. Years later, when Leo and Lily graduated from high school with full scholarships to quality private schools, thanks to the fund Michael had created and maintained, they made sure to invite him to their graduation. Sitting in the audience, next to Joanna, who was now a registered nurse working at a private hospital, Michael watched those two children he had tried to demoralize become admirable young adults, full of potential and solid values. In his graduation speech, Leo mentioned his teachers, his mother, and then paused. He looked directly at Michael in the audience and said, "And I also want to thank my Uncle Michael, who taught us that it's never too late to change, to learn, to be better. He once gave us a test without us knowing, and it ended up being him who passed the most important test, the test of becoming a real person." Michael cried right there in the middle of the audience, not caring who was watching. They were tears of pride, of gratitude, of a kind of fulfillment his business awards had never provided. He had helped those children financially, yes, but they had saved him emotionally, spiritually, humanly, and that was a kind of debt he could never, and would never want to, fully repay. The mansion on the Upper East Side remained Michael's house, but it was no longer a lonely fortress. It was a home that welcomed visitors, that had laughter echoing through its halls, that had stories being built within its marble walls. The drawing of the refrigerator with legs remained framed in his office, a little faded with time, but more valuable than any expensive work of art that decorated the house. And every time Michael looked at that drawing, he remembered that the true test of life isn't the one we conduct on others in secret, hidden in pantries, setting cruel traps. The true test is the one we face within ourselves every day when we must choose between what is right and what is easy, between suspicion and faith, between walls and bridges. And thanks to a hard-working mother and two 6-year-old twins, Michael finally learned how to pass that test. Not perfectly, not always, but honestly. And in the end, that was what mattered. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Michael, Joanna, Leo and Lily has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of transformation and redemption, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this story resonated with you the most. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between what was right and what was easy? How did you handle it? Share with us. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, that make us reflect on our own values and choices. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you see the world in a different way.